So y'all can hear me? Can y'all hear me well? Y'all hear me good? So I have a lot of conversations during the course of the week, right? I counsel people. You know, so people call me, they got different things they're dealing with, whether it's personal relationships or family relationships or their own, interpersonal relationship, or intrapersonal relationship. You know what I'm saying? Like the conversations that they have with themselves, and to have a combative internal dialogue is obviously very counterproductive because nobody has a greater degree of access to your consciousness than you do. Nobody knows the things that you fear or that hit you deeply emotionally better than you do, even when you're not conscious of it. The subconscious is ever aware. Like I told you guys before, the subconscious processes 400 billion bits of information per second. So the subconscious runs circles around the conscious mind. The subconscious is responsible for 96 to 98% of what we do. So if your internal dialogue, if the things you say to yourself in your head, if those things are counterproductive, if those things are destructive or undermining, then you are your own worst enemy. And this is the case for a lot of people. I believe that a lot of people abuse themselves, abuse alcohol, abuse drugs, abuse the people around them, abuse their friends and family and so forth because of the negative and destructive internal dialogue that they probably had since they were children. If you grow up as a child and your primary caregivers, your mother, father, whoever it is supposed to be responsible for taking care of you and developing you and protecting you and so forth, and they're an abusive narcissist, they're going to give you your self-perception. Before you're introduced to a mirror, right? Before you reach a level of consciousness and awareness, you are looking at the world through the people who are around you, the faces you constantly see as you're lying there looking around at the world from your swaddle, from that little blanket that they put you in. And you don't know anything about a mirror or a reflection or none of that. Your engagement with the world is through the facial expressions, the sounds, the voices of the people who are responsible for you, the people who are supposed to protect you and guide you in the world. And so before you get to see yourself through your own eyes, you develop a view of yourself through those people. Now, if those people are, say, a common experience is that your parent is nobody of position or authority, not at home, not at work, not in the world. They're a peon. They're a regular person, no power, no authority. They've never been able to. You got people who in their entire lives, at no point did they ever have the kind of impact on people where they could tell somebody what to do, or how to be, or what they can and cannot do. Never had no kind of power, but they've observed other people. I see you, Charlie, or Charles Daniels. I'm not sure who that is, but I'm gonna let you know. Somebody that they can basically dominate. Some people are not healthy enough. Oh, you didn't mean to try to join me, huh, Charles Daniels? You didn't accept that. I just tried to bring him on live, and he didn't accept it. You didn't mean the request to go live with me, did you? I ain't scared of you, motherfuckers. You come right on. It's whatever. It's whatever. Friend or foe, we can go. Don't matter to me. You dig? So, if that person has never had power, that person's never felt, they've observed other people, as a child in the schoolyard, they've seen, the girl who uh, was bigger than everybody else in first grade. You know, they seen her, you know, tell people what to do. You do that, and you can't do that, and don't nobody play with that person, whatever, whatever. And although they might not like it, they do have some regard for it because people are responding, and they're like, "Wow, I wish I could do that. Maybe I wouldn't be that way with that ability, but I wish I had that ability. If I had that ability, I would tell people, you know, don't be mean to other kids and play with, encourage, and be nice to other kids. I wouldn't do with my uh, power what this person is doing with their power. I mean, that might be a little bit of a complicated or sophisticated kind of thinking process for a second grade or whatever, but just you don't have to have the vocabulary to be able to articulate a sophisticated idea, to have a sophisticated idea. I mean, this is the reason that you have people who don't speak especially well, but are great thinkers, you know? So when a kid observes that and sees other children with it, that it gets their attention. And, you know, they desire to have that ability to influence other people, like this child's influence other people. If that never happens for them, and then they grow to become, say, a teenager, and they're still not the captain of the team or the leader of the group, right? They still don't get to make decisions. They still don't get to pick and choose who's on the team and who's not. They still don't get to influence their peers in terms of what we will do, what games we'll play, what games we won't play, who we'll play with, and who we won't play with. So, but now as they're older, they're more conscious of this behavior. They're more conscious of this dynamic. So they're more aware of the fact that they don't have that kind of power in the world. So then they go on to become, high schooler, and it's the same thing, they're still waiting to get picked by the group of their peers, whether they're girls or guys that, are the group to be a part of. They're still waiting to be included in that. Or if they're included in that, they're still, looking for the opportunity for them to assert themselves or assert their will, be in charge, but it never happens, right? They just don't have that it factor with it that makes people, either they're not big enough or strong enough or, cool enough, or they wear glasses or they have braces, or, their skin isn't clear enough, or their hair is not long enough or nice enough, or whatever it is that makes people defer to other people and relinquish their power in any group dynamic. You understand what I'm saying? Whatever makes people acquiesce to other people, they don't have that thing to make people do that, right? And although they don't have it, they have witnessed other people have it, demonstrate it, use it all their lives. There's a part of them that desires, even for a moment, to see what that's like. What does that feel like? What does it feel like to be that person? What does it feel like to be in charge, to be the boss, to be in control? What does that feel like? So at the point at which they become a parent, if they haven't emotionally matured past the point where they are enamored with the idea of being in charge of somebody, that child could be in a lot of trouble. That child could be subjected to a lot of narcissistic behavior. Not necessarily that just because a person is behaving in a narcissistic manner doesn't mean they are a narcissist. Sometimes people just, do narcissistic type things, and they aren't necessarily a narcissist. It's not like their personality, whatever. It's just, and they feel in themselves or whatever have you, and that it could be the case that the person, the parent now, is kind of a narcissist, or they could just have those moments where they come home from work, they've been pushed around at work, told what to do at work or whatever have you. They don't have any power dynamic in their relationship with their siblings or their parents, whatever. Like they just have no power nowhere, and they get home. Even when, like a lot of those kinds of people, when they get behind the wheel of a car, they're some of the most aggressive and inconsiderate drivers that you'll ever come into contact with, because between them and that wheel, there is no other authority between them and that wheel. and that's why, you know, they're inclined to be obnoxious behind the wheel, be bullies behind the wheel. You know, the less empowered a person is in a general way, the more inclined they are to abuse opportunities to assert themselves, you know. And not for nothing, but the reputation that women have had all throughout my lifetime, and you got to realize most of everything that we think or believe we know is propaganda, and it is created by, you know, white male patriarchy. You know what I mean? Because everybody, the white male the patriarchal white male is the enemy of everybody, or everybody is his enemy. Everything is about his control. Everything is about his assertion of his power. Everything, to his own detriment, to the point where, like, he'll cut off his own nose, you know? So women being subjected to that at the point at which, and it's relatively recent in the, you know, string of history, that women came into the position of power and autonomy and were able to do things like, you know, vote, drive, you know, shit like that. You see that women's rights to their own autonomy, their own bodies, their own decision making, you see that it's constantly. There's never been a point in the history of this country, this world, but this country, where women's autonomy was not under attack in some way, shape, or form. Never. It's always constantly under attack, always. So if you are, and I recognized this when I was a kid, that this is why I believe women typically are smarter than men. Because women, unlike men, cannot rely on the two things. One, the typical advantage that men have physically. Men develop larger bones, more dense bones, larger muscle mass, right? So they're typically bigger and stronger, especially historically, before the food started getting fucked with, and started putting steroids in every damn thing, right? Making everybody into, you know, behemoths and shit. But the other, you know, thing is that there's a patriarchal system that will bolster even the most weak men and give them positions of power and authority over, you know, over females, right? So women have dealt with this condition forever. So it seemed to me that because women can't rely on their physical stature to impose their will and their desires, and they couldn't rely on their collective voice because the patriarchal system muted their voice for decades and decades and decades. Like, do a little bit of a dive in the history of women and women's rights. You'll be surprised that, like, some of your great grandmothers didn't have the right to do anything. You know, they didn't have the right to vote, to drive a car, to do anything. Right? So it makes sense to me that if they couldn't rely on their physical strength, they couldn't rely on any kind of political power, then they would have to be craftier. And they would teach each other that. So a mother would begin to teach her daughter early in life how to, you can't be reactionary like your brothers. You can't jump to your feet to fight, you know, and, you know, lead with your fists like your brothers can. One is 9 times out of 10, you're not going to be able to physically overcome if your opposition is a male, you're not going to be able to overcome. You know, but, you know, 2, there's all kinds of systems to undermine you if you are, you know. You'll be deemed not ladylike, or, you know, unsuitable for partnership, or dyke, or whatever, right? So you have to be smart. You have to outthink them. You have to be patient. So they develop patience and intellectual sophistication much earlier. I think that's why women tend to be, there are biological reasons attributed to the idea that women mature faster than men do. But there's sociological implications as well, because if you live in a society where
you are constantly pressured or contained or held down, whatever, then you're going to have to adapt or die, right? Pivot or perish. You're going to have to figure out ways to circumvent the system that is operating against you, and undermining your power. And I think that women have been teaching other women that forever and ever and ever. And that's why women typically, in my experience, women typically are better charactered, are much more reliable, far more resilient, because resilience is a response, to managing your challenges, first and foremost, before going to any physical action, with mental, dexterity, being quick-witted, know how to use your mind and deal with things, And so, I believe that's why I believe I've observed in my experience, women are typically smarter than men, you know. But when they get behind that wheel, and I think this is where the reputation for women being bad drivers, whatever, I think that it comes, and this has been, in my own experience from when I began driving and the things I've observed, or whatever. And it's like when women get behind the wheel, it's like no husband between me and this wheel, no man between me and this wheel, no boss between me and this wheel. It's just me and this wheel. Nobody can tell me what to do. I got my hand on this thing, and this thing controls this thing I'm in, and I'm going to do what I want to do. And I might have to acquiesce to your authority or your superiority, physical superiority, whatever. In any other instance, but behind this wheel, I'm in a 4,000 pound vehicle. You're in a 4,000 pound vehicle. You know what I'm saying? And I got control of this. You got control of that. And we even. And I might acquiesce in the office or acquiesce in the home, but behind this wheel, I'm not acquiescing. Like, move out my way. You know what I'm saying? And no, I'm not letting you pass, and no, you're not getting in front of me. And I don't care if you're just going to be one car behind me and we both at the stoplight. I'm going to be first. And don't get in front of me. And I've observed this. So, you know what I mean? And I don't just offhandedly attribute it to the fact that, oh, it's a woman and they're built that way or something like that. No, I think it's a response to environmental circumstances, And when it comes to a person in general, beyond the gender, in general, being unaccustomed to being in power, and then they find themselves in some situation like a parent, and they're now in power, I think that if the person has not reached a point of emotional maturity and mental balance, that they can become tyrannical, You do what I say because I said it, and I'm the child. You be like, yo, what? I'm your kid. I'm not your enemy. Like, why are you treating me this way? So if a kid grows up in an environment, in a home like that, and this is they're developing in this home. They come out of this woman into the world, and before they get to see a mirror or learn what a mirror is or what a mirror does or what is being reflected back to them in the mirror, they see themselves through the reflection that they're getting back. So if I'm engaging a person, and this is what most people do in general, if I'm engaging you and I want you to have an impression of me, I will project towards you what I want you to reflect back to me as a response to what I'm projecting. So think of yourself as a mirror and say, I'm a child, and I put on, I'm a 5-year-old kid. I put on my dad's tie and shirt and tie and his jacket on. And he's a full grown man. And I have on his tie, his shirt, his jacket, his hat, right? And I stand in front of the mirror and I go, hey, what did I tell you? It's time to go to bed. Eat your dinner. Do as I told you. Oh, you're going to get punished, whatever. Because, this is a child's simple interpretation of what a man is, right? A man, he's the boss. He's in charge. He gives direction. He gives the commands. You do what he says. He's got the power, right? When that child is reflecting that to that mirror, and getting that image back and making that tone and intonation and all that, whatever. In that moment, that child believes that they are looking at what they see. So in their mind, they are now the man in charge, you know, and what this reflecting back from that mirror is what they're projecting. What they're projecting is a fallacy, but what the mirror is sending back to them is the truth they want to see, which is why they're projecting the fallacy. They want to see themselves in a position of power. So when a child growing up in a home with a parent that is not a person that's in power anywhere under any circumstance, and then they they look at this at themselves, this parent is the mirror, you know, that they're looking at themselves through. However that parent treats them or behaves towards them, whatever degree of value that parent reflects back to them, whatever degree of power or control that parent reflects back to them, the parent being the mirror, that's what they see. That's how they see themselves. So if the parent is disempowering to them, then they see themselves as a person without power. And if they grow up in that, their natural self-preservation is going to make them constantly outside of that dynamic between them and their parent, because their parent is the mirror that constantly shows them no power, shows them as being powerless. That's what that parent constantly shows them. So there's a part of them that's part of their survival that needs to see, that needs to satisfy the need to be in power. So they go and they seek it, right? So they get out in the world, they move around their peers, you know, they go to school, and, you know, they try to impose themselves. They try to, you know, reflect or project power and strength. So, you know, they behave like, you know, I got it together and I know what to do and I'm in charge and follow me, whatever, in hopes that people will respond to their projection of personal power and then acquiesce and give them that power so they can begin to feel like the person they're projecting themselves to be. If they don't have what it takes to bring that kind of behavior out of people, they're going to continue to seek it. They're going to continue as they go forward to try and find different places and opportunities where they can mine that out of their interactions. You know, where can I be the person in power? Where can I be the person in charge? Where can I be the person that everybody looks to and says, what do we do next? What should we do next? How should we think? What should we think? What should we feel about what we are supposed to think? You know, people seek that typically when they don't have it. And not everybody has that desire in them. There are a lot of people who I believe are passive in their nature, and they're fine with other people being in charge. But the ones that are not, varying degrees, but the ones that are really not okay with that, those are the ones I believe develop into the people who end up being in charge, not because they're qualified, but because they are so driven to be in charge that they will do, say anything, whatever you need me to say in order for you to feel like, yeah, you should be in charge. Go ahead, be the boss of me. I'll say it. Even if it's got nothing to do with who I really am as a person. I will say whatever it takes for you to give me the control. Give me the scepter. I'll be the king. Not because I'm qualified to be the king, but just because, you know, I want to be the king. I want to be the person who is worthy of being the king. That's what I want. I want that. You know, what we're dealing with right now in our society right now, what you guys are seeing in this regime that is in that building over on Pennsylvania Avenue in DC. It is the epitome of that. All that individual and all his minion around him. They're all these weak, power crazy, power mad, power hungry narcissists and sycophants Because even shameless ass kissers want to be in. That's why they kiss an ass shamelessly in hopes of one day being able to be the person whose ass gets kissed. That's why there's so much illogical behavior. That's why there's so much shit that makes you go, well, what the fuck is the purpose of that? Like, that doesn't make any sense at all. What are you doing that for? It's not for any logical reason. It's all emotionally based, and they just really, really, really want people to think well of them. So that internal dialogue, that introspection, you know, that voice in your head, your voice that's talking to you all the time, that's telling you things, is very, very important that that voice be monitored, even curated, because that voice has, like I said, the ultimate access to you. It knows all your secrets. It knows all your fears. It knows all of the things that you think about yourself that you would never tell anybody that you think about yourself. Because obviously it's always about you projecting to the world, which is your mirror, the most flattering image of yourself that you can possibly be. So that you can feel as wonderful or valuable as you're projecting to people that, you know, you are. You know, so people are not really feeling how they project. They're not really feeling good about themselves. What they're feeling is the way that other people view them and respond to them. You know, and that's what they feel good about. They feel good about being able to manipulate people into the idea that they are somebody that is of value and greatness and, you know, whatever the standard of value is in a particular instance, because obviously it's different standards for different situations, right? If you're in a criminal organization, then, you know, the standard for greatness is, you know, often being not such a good human being, you know. And if you're in a, say, it's hard to say where there's any place where actually being a genuinely good human being is truly valued, really valued, not just, where they, not just, it's not just, you know, it's not just lip service. Oh man, I love the fact that you're such a wonderful and beneficent human being and always thinking about others and have so much empathy, whatever. It's like, people will say that they have a value for such things, but you don't generally see people who are, you know, empathetic and considerate of others and helpful and of service to others. You don't typically see them at, you know, the power tables, do you? You don't see them running multinational billion-dollar corporations, do you? You see people who are unempathetic and people who are super selfish and extremely self-indulgent and narcissistic. Those are the people who are in the positions of power and control and leadership and so forth in these organizations. So having these kinds of conversations, remember I was telling you how I have conversations with people and I, you know, talk to them about the various things they might be struggling with, relationships, you know, with their family members, relationships with their significant others, and relationships with themselves. And those other two relationships, whether it's family or significant others, you know, lovers, or whatever it might be, all the relationships we have are predicated on the relationship we have with ourselves. The first relationship that is most important is the one we have with ourselves. The dialogue we're having with ourselves, the things we say to ourselves inside our head, those things set the stage for how we view ourselves and thus how we want to be viewed. And that means how we will project, right? So if a girl is made to believe, you know, that she's a slore, you know, half slut, half whore, if she's made to believe that, then at a certain point, she's going to say, well, that's what I am. So that's what I want the world to see. That's how I see myself. So that's what I want.